want to start with Roman and your thoughts on him, because like I just said, I think he is the guy that makes the most sense there in house, but Scotty and Ben are the guys that have outsnapped him so far this season. Do you think Roman, do you feel the same way about it as I do when it comes to Roman should be the guy that gets the opportunity there?
I think I don't. I think
Whoa.
should is a like no one on this roster outside of Calvin Austin should be the number
Yeah.
2 wide receiver behind DK Metcalf. Is Roman Wilson like ready to take on more responsibilities? I don't know. I've seen nothing in meaningful competition to make me feel confident in his ability to do that in Calvin Austin's absence. I really liked what I saw from Roman Wilson in the preseason, and I wrote about this, after I want to say the second or third preseason game where, the potential for wide receiver 2 was certainly starting to develop, and I stand by that assessment in that time, but the difference now is the Steelers do not have that trust in him. And it seems like if it's going to be forced onto him just because of injuries, like
Yeah.
that doesn't make me feel, again, overwhelmingly confident that they can, fully trust this guy to continue moving the offense. For Calvin Austin's, shortcomings, and for Calvin Austin's inability to really produce on like a larger scale through the first 4 weeks, he was building that trust with Aaron Rodgers. That pass to him to win that week 3 game against the New England Patriots felt like a really like a turning point moment for Calvin Austin, and just like gaining
Yes.
that trust from Aaron Rodgers. And there has been just nothing for that as far as Roman Wilson. He can barely get on the field, as you mentioned, with Scotty Miller outpacing him. So I just like, I would love to see this. It's an unfortunate circumstance that this is allowing him to maybe get more snaps. And I hope he can live up to it. But there's nothing from the tape from before that is like showing me or telling me like, oh yeah, he should have already been wide receiver 2, and now this is the time that he can just kind of step into that opportunity.
So you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. Do you look at it as you put him out there to try at all, or you just say you didn't earn this, we have to move on, even if
I
it's in
think,
a practice setting? Do you
well,
test
I
the
mean,
waters at all?
you have to test the waters, I guess, like, cuz what you are in no circumstance to do otherwise. Like, it's either you roll out Scotty Miller as your number 2, in a couple of weeks against the Cleveland Browns. Like, you just
Yeah.
can't do that. And I imagine Omar Khan continues to monitor the trade market and is keeping tabs on players, but I just think you have to let him try. I'm
Yeah.
not convinced that even if they let him try, that it will then translate to him seeing, 50% or more of the offensive snaps come week 6 against the Browns.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I don't disagree. I'm not going to say, and I went on a whole rant my Steelers to go today, that Roman has not earned anything in the Pittsburgh Steelers' eyes, and that's why he is where he is. It's not a, oh well, Roman needs to be that guy. They need to give him that opportunity. I think he's the only guy that has the potential, the upside to maybe turn it into something. You're not going to put Scotty Miller out there or Ben Skoranek and say, you never know, these guys might just be superstars in the making. You just, maybe there's more
Mhm.
left in the tank. No, at least with Roman, maybe he breaks out. Maybe he is that guy. Maybe he has a game. Maybe he stinks and you are way worse without him and you've missed the mark. Do you think that they'd go trade? Do you think that they'd look at a trade or a signing? Like, where's your next direction? If Roman's not the guy and they don't think he's the guy, and I mean, unless you unless you feel Scotty Miller's the guy they are going to put on the field against the Cleveland Browns in Week 6. No offense to Scotty or Benny Sco. Where do they go? Like, where in your eyes? Where is their next? Where is the realistic next train of thought?
I think the realistic train of thought looks sort of something like this. You either have identified that replacement player, and it is someone like someone I threw out there right after the Calvin Austin injury, and this was before we've gotten like some more positive updates about maybe the length of time that he will be out for. But while
Mm-hmm.
that's still sort of undetermined, a player that I mentioned that is not maybe exciting, but I think could just maybe fit the bill of temporarily helping is Rashid Shaheed from the New Orleans Saints, and he's not the flashy name of, maybe like the Chris Olave or, someone else who some of those bigger wide receivers that could maybe be had, like a Calvin Ridley or something like that as well, is another name that comes to mind. But he would be a player who has some history of production in the league of being number 2/number 3 receiver. It doesn't completely supplant Calvin Austin for when he does return. So why I use him as an example is because I think the Steelers just have to look for, they either have to have a solution ready and it's a veteran who can kind of plug and play and they can use him and Calvin Austin when he returns, or you have to just kind of let it, play it as it lies, so to speak. Let Roman Wilson take more snaps, let Scotty Miller take more snaps, etc., so on down the food chain. But I really think those are the only two avenues they can go, is going out and getting a veteran that they, feel confident in, but isn't a superstar or anything close to it, or they're going to just let it lie.
It's such an awful place to be. All right, I'm going to toss out a name here. There was rumors about this guy a while ago, and we both said it wasn't going to happen. Maybe in a shorter span it does. And here's the thing. Since then, there is no wide receiver 3 in Pittsburgh. So it's not as if, if the Steelers were to go get somebody, like you said, like it doesn't feel like you're trying to replace Calvin because you understand that Calvin's going to come back. But there is no wide receiver 3 in Pittsburgh. There's not even Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth. They're wide receiver. Pat Freiermuth doesn't even exist in this offense anymore. I don't know what happened to him, but the guy is getting paid a boatload of money. And I'm a huge Pat Freiermuth believer, but he's doing literally nothing. He's being out-snapped by Darnell Washington. When it comes to a guy that they could go get, and I hate this name coming out of my mouth, but is Odell like on the table right now? Like, can you look at Odell and say he makes sense in an aspect of you need him for a short-term guy, for 4 or 5 weeks, and then he falls back into a wide receiver 3 that comes off the bench and maybe plays 15 snaps a game, and he's cheap, and he wants to be with a winner. And guess who's looks real good right now heading into week 5? The Pittsburgh Steelers. Just, it doesn't, you don't want it to add up. You don't want it to make sense, but the math equation's there. The math equation says, maybe. Go ahead.
Yeah, but no. Buddy, I have to agree with you. I don't want it. I don't want to, I hate it whenever I have to agree with you about certain things.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things because not only is, OBJ potentially an option, not a likely one, I will state, but an option that probably needs to be considered current situation. Another name that you've also mentioned before is, someone like a Deontay Johnson. Like, you just have to kind of you're just throwing out, you're casting lines everywhere and just seeing if anything catches at this point, because what you're going to get from those reels in, so to speak, is players who can maybe help for a couple of games. Yeah. I don't think they're the likeliest options. I think you have to, again, like Calvin Ridley is probably someone who's on the table. You have to ask, is someone like a Jacoby Myers actually available, still disgruntled with his contract situation with Las Vegas? Those are the only, between those and the other people I mentioned previously a couple of minutes ago, those are really the only realistic options I continue to see, unless you're someone else that I'm forgetting.
All right, so let me toss another name out there at you. Okay. Jeremy Fowler the other day tossed this name, and at the time it was ridiculous. It made no sense. Nobody was thinking about it. The Pittsburghs, it was just you were trying to talk wide receiver when there was no more talk of wide receiver. It has died down. One shoulder injury later, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, it makes sense to go get a wide receiver to some capacity because they've been aggressive. Jabril Peppers barely played against the Minnesota Vikings, but the Steelers made sure that they had a starting safety for if Deshaun Elliott was out. The other day, he said Curtis Samuel, and I know everybody was like, oh, it's got, no, what are we doing? I know, I get it. That was my reaction too. Curtis Samuel could be a guy that's on the trade block, doesn't really have a home in Buffalo right now, isn't really part of that team, but is an experienced NFL veteran who's played that wide receiver 2 role before in Washington, in Carolina. He's had opportunities in Buffalo. Then he dealt with an injury last season. I mean, there it is. There's the name. Again, there's no Terry McLaurin's. Tyreek Hill blew his knee out last night, so that one's off the table. There's some interesting ones in the chat that we're going to get to in a little while, because I think that makes it's exciting, but nothing's been reported. Curtis Samuel might be the only guy that actually is on the trade block. And again, like, I have the same reaction you have. It's like, how did we get here? Life is miserable. We should be excited about other things. I mean, what's your thoughts on Curtis Samuel?
I mean, the dude's a healthy scratch in Buffalo right now, making close to $10 million. He fits the bill of just sort of being a temporary 1 or 2 game solution, I guess. But if he is at all like a real quote
Scotty Miller
unquote,
fits that bill.
that exactly, you made my point for me, my friend. Like, there's nothing that Curtis Samuel. It's the same, it's the carousel coming around again on this debate of like what wide receiver moves the needle for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Curtis Samuel does absolutely nothing to do that. So desperate times calls for desperate measures. I certainly think the Steelers are like reaching that point in terms of their thinning wide receiver depth, but man, Curtis Samuel was no solution. All respect to the player. Hope he can turn it around. He has a couple 600-yard seasons under his resume. Not taking away anything from him in that regard, but is nothing close to an answer for the Steelers offense or anything.
No, you play Scotty Miller, dude. You test out Roman Wilson. You utilize Pat Fryermuth and Jonnu Smith, and you see what you have in these other guys. I don't care what the answer is, but it's not making it. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to give up a 7th-round pick for Curtis Samuel? He's going to come in here. He's going to take 2 weeks to adapt to the offense, which at that point you've already saw what you have in Scotty Miller and Roman Wilson, and then he's never going to get acclimated enough to actually play. Calvin Austin's going to come back, and then Curtis Samuel's just going to take up a roster spot, or he's going to get cut. I like, that's the solution here. That's how we got here. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make it. And that's the wildest part of this, is that there is nobody that, if you're not going to go make a giant splash, makes sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It just doesn't. You got to live life for what it is, of Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, and Ben Skoranek, and hope that DK. And here's the best part about that. The part that should leave some hope is that, I mean, I have a lot of faith Ben Skoranek would take out a guy leading DK Metcalf to the end zone too. I have a lot of faith Roman Wilson would make that same block. And that's not taking anything away from Calvin. That was a hell of a block. That was a hell of a block. I got a lot of faith Ben Skoranek would catch a football if Aaron Rodgers threw him a football open, because he did it. It's how he started the season. Scotty Miller's the same way. Like, these are not guys that are going to make splashes, but these are guys that, are going to be reliable when you need them to be reliable. Roman's the only giant question mark. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's not. Hopefully the running game is enough to get things going. I have no idea. But I don't look at a low ball, whatever, just go get somebody, trade or signing. Honestly, I think Odell makes more sense than Curtis Samuel. Like,
there's less risk involved if it doesn't work out, I would say, because there's no expectations for Odell Beckham Jr. to do really anything again in the NFL anytime soon. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like, Curtis Samuel at least like comes with some sort of like financial obligations you have to work out. OBJ, you could just bring him in. It's like adding someone to your practice squad, essentially, So Curtis Samuel, there's at least that like frustrating part of like, if you like, hearing you describe possibly giving up a 7th-round pick and then cutting Curtis Samuel was like the most grating sort of scenario to hear. And it's just, if that's a player you're considering acquiring, don't.
I don't disagree. I don't. It's Mike Williams, but worse. And that's where you're at. And it's, again, look at it. And I'm going to finish off with this one before we jump into Overreaction Tuesday here. Deontay Johnson's still on the board there, brother. Deontay Johnson's still available to be signed in free agency. And you're lying to me and everybody else if you or anybody listening to this says that Deontay is not a better option just playing wise than Odell Beckham and Curtis Samuel. Like, drama wise, Whew. You know what I mean? Way worse option. Fill in for 3 games. I'm taking Deontay over any of these guys at any time. And
Fair enough. Fair enough.
you know, I would just saying he's still out there, rated the number 1 guy on the free agency market.